Identifying intervals: major, minor, augmented, diminished. Before you start, you need to know how to identify key signatures for all major keys. Step 1. The bottom note in any interval should be considered the tonic, or the first note of the scale. Step 2. Determine whether the top note is part of the scale defined by the bottom note. Okay, let's look at a couple of examples here. So in this case, the C natural indicates the key of C major, which has no sharps, no flats. So then when we look at the top note, the A, we consider is A part of the C major scale? In this case, we say yes, it is. When we look at the A flat, this is not part of the C major scale, so that's actually lowered by 1. Okay, now if it is within the major scale, intervals of 1, 4, 5, and 8 are considered to be perfect. Intervals of 2, 3, 6, and 7 are major. Okay, this is a little interval analysis box. I would copy this. You will find this helpful later when you're solving your intervals. This area here that I'm just putting a bigger box around, this is your major scales. So within major scales you have perfect intervals and you have major intervals. Now if you lower a perfect interval, you would get a diminished interval. If you raise a perfect interval, you get an augmented interval. If you raise a major interval, you get an augmented interval. If you lower a major interval, you get a minor interval. If you lower a minor interval, you get a diminished interval. Okay, let's do some examples. Okay, so in this case, the bottom note is D. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking D major, 2 sharps, right? So we have F sharp, C sharp. Okay, now I look at the top note, C. C, not part of scale. In fact, and then I got to determine, well, is it higher than what would be in the scale, or is it lower than? In the scale we would have a C sharp, so this is lowered by 1 semitone. So it's lower by 1 semitone. So if you refer back to that chart that you copied, you know that we're going from what would have been a major when we counted up. Sorry, we forgot to do that whole counting part. I'm assuming you know this anyway, so that we count from the bottom, starting with the bottom note is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is a 7th. Okay, determining the quality. It's not part of the scale, it's lowered by 1, so if you refer back to that chart, major, when it's lowered, becomes minor. Okay, again, for step 1, I should have mentioned this before, as I said, is to determine the numeric part of the interval. So in this case we have a 6th. When we determine quality, I need to again look at the scale of the lower note. The bottom note is F, so that's 1 flat, which is of course B flat. So in this case, D sharp is not part of the scale. It's actually raised by 1. So I'm thinking, okay, so if it's 6th, if it was in the scale, it would be major. D natural will be major. This has been raised 1, so this is an augmented 6th. Okay, bass clef. In this case, we're looking at the key of A flat major. If you think about the key of A flat major, you have 4 flats. Okay, B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat. And you notice I said E flat, and this upper note is an E. So it's been raised, or it is higher than what would be in the major scale by 1 semitone. Okay, the number in this case is a 5th, and because it's been raised, we go from perfect to augmented. Okay, here we got another 5th. Again, I just do that by counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I always start counting on that bottom note. And then I think about the key of the bottom note. The bottom note is B. So B major has 5 sharps. Father Charles goes down and I see that F, obviously being the first sharp, is one of those sharps, so this is lower than what would be in the key of B major by 1 semitone. So our fifth, perfect within the scale, but because it's lowered, this is a diminished fifth. And that's it.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.